I'll present on some research I've been doing at Newcastle University called Biochar for Soil Management in Belize. So my presentation is designed with an overview of biochar, and then I go into its implementation in Belize, and then I move into how it absorbs pesticides. So firstly, my study focused on Belize because Belize depends a lot on agriculture. We do a lot of agriculture, but we also work with the natural ecosystem. So what I wanted to do was to balance both agricultural production and environmental sustainability. And one of the ways would be to implement biochar in our agricultural systems. Has anyone heard about biochar before? Okay, so if I can't answer a question, I'll move it to you. So biochar is basically waste material gathered and placed in a kiln, pyrolysis kiln, and you pyrolyze the waste material under low oxygen levels and high temperature, and then the biochar is produced. Now there are two major benefits which are for agricultural production and environmental sustainability. So the benefits of biochar include carbon storage, reduced odor, it helps with the soil, and it can also absorb pesticides. So the way you make biochar, it can go from industrial scale into small cook stoves, which have been used in Belize and also in parts of Africa. So this is a retort diagram. So you could have it's basically a drum within a drum, but you burn it under very low oxygen levels. So that's the key, the oxygen levels. Here we have a picture from Mr. Nisbet. He's been working on, from 2012, some biochar kilns. So these kilns can be made from recyclable material. So with the biochar, it can be produced from any biomass. However, it depends on what you want to use the biochar for. Let's say if you have rice husk and you burn that at 700 degrees Celsius, the structure of the surface of the biochar changes, such as pore size and the surface area. So here we have different temperatures that the biochar has been made of. So you see from 400 degrees Celsius, the pores, they start to rearrange. So as it goes higher, it can go from biochar into graphene structures. So the structure is what determines how you're going to use the biochar. Here again we have, I'm not sure if you can see it, but we see the change in the surface area as the temperature increases. So the objective of using biochar is mainly to use from agricultural waste, forestry waste, and once you pyrolyze this material, you can use it for the soil, you can obtain energy, and you can avoid carbon emissions by just converting the feedstock into biochar. So here we have what is some people do in Belize, the slash and burn. But the slash and burn interferes with the water in the soil, So it would be better to slash and char so you have healthier soils. So when you put the biochar in the soil, you can make the soil better by improving the water infiltration, water retention, aeration, soil stability. You can also modify the pH, but this is usually for acidic soils. So from an acidic soil, you can increase to a more alkaline soil. You can improve the organic carbon in the soil and the cation exchange capacity, which is responsible for the nutrient absorption of the plants. You can also stabilize organic matter, and once you have the biochar in the soil, when you add the fertilizer, the biochar retains the fertilizer for longer periods of time, so it gives it a slower release. Therefore, it makes the fertilizer more effective. Also, when you have the biochar in the soil, it caters for microorganisms to live within the pores of the biochar. So these organisms are key to keeping the soil healthy. Here we have a very famous picture. This side is supposed to be a very acidic soil, and then we have a dark soil. We in the Amazon, what had inspired the biochar research was that they were investigating some parcels of land, and they realized that some parcels were less fertile than the ones that had carbon. So they realized that it's the carbon that increases the soil fertility of the soil. So what I did with biochar in Belize was I designed a research that would incorporate different stakeholders of Belize, which included governmental agents, farmers, extension officers, research and education, and even agricultural suppliers. And I came up with about 114 participants in total. So I was from Corozal to San Ignacio, down to Toledo, conducting semi-structured interviews. I also had stakeholder surveys and focus groups, and I asked them about their opinions and perspectives about implying biochar in Belize. So here we have the stakeholder matrix. So most of them were farmers, extension officers, and in education and research. What we found out was that 13% of the participants, this was for the semi-structured interviews, we found out that 13% of them said that there is adequate information of biochar, while 47% stated that they knew about biochar, and 20% knew that it's being used in Belize. So when we asked them about what they would use biochar for, 89% said that it would be beneficial for the environment, but they also spoke about pesticide pollution and how it would help with reducing its effects on citizens. So the main motivation to use biochar in Belize was higher yield, agricultural yield, and soil health, but also environmental safety. And the key barriers, or I would say opportunities, were skepticism. Most of the farmers said that they won't just use the biochar in their soil, they want field trials before they imply it. Because according to them, a lot of researchers give them a lot of recommendations, but they don't really see the sample. The other one we had was biochar cost. Most of them claim that it would be one more step in their system and it would be quite expensive for them. And then we had transportation cost. So in all, the main motivations were yield, soil health, and environmental protection. And to resolve the barriers, we had trials, research, education, and networking amongst the farmers and the governmental agents and the extension officers. Now we move into, so from the results of the stakeholder analysis, I picked one of the topics that they came across, and which was environmental protection. So what I did was I decided that soils in Belize, when they do the slash and burn, it tends to degrade the soil. So I chose soils from different agricultural regions of Belize where they possibly could be degraded, and I tested them for herbicide and agrochemical leaching. I chose 2 herbicides, which were diuron and atrazine, and 3 antibiotics. So these agrochemicals can leach in tropical soils. So what I could do was to amend the soils, to mix the soils with biochar and see how the pesticide leaches, if it does leach in the soil. I chose 3 biochar types, which were rice husk, softwood pellets, and miscanthus straw. And these were produced at 700 degrees Celsius in a industrial pyrolyzer. This was specifically for the absorption of agrochemicals. So if you would like to do it for soil health, you could use a biochar being produced at 500 degrees Celsius, which would also work. So I had 3 distinct soil types. And what we found out that was that once you add the biochar to the soil, it drastically decreases atrazine and diuron. Atrazine is one of these herbicides that are banned in Europe, but still being used in Belize and US and Brazil in tropical regions. And atrazine easily leaches down the soil. So when we added the biochar, it reduced it to regulatory standards, European regulatory standards, which would be less than here. Which means that adding biochar to the soil could help with the leaching reduction. So apart from the empirical data, I also went into doing some modeling, some pesticide fit modeling. And the modeling also showed that when you add biochar to the soil, either as a top layer or mixed 15 centimeters within the soil, it also reduces the pesticide leaching down to 1 meter to 0 micrograms per liter. So all of this shows that the biochar does work in our tropical soils. And then finally, I came back to Belize and did some focus groups, worked with focus groups. And they also said that these would be solutions to using biochar in Belize, which once again included field trials, research, collaboration and training, and to resolve the funding dilemma. Sorry, I'm a bit jumpy, but yeah. So you have any questions? Yes.
Is biochar available? I can go purchase it somewhere?
Excuse me?
Is it available to purchase?
Here in Belize, I do not have, I don't know if it's being purchased in Belize, if it's being...
You gotta make your own.
Yeah. Yes?
Of the 3 systems we have for crops, we have composting and biochar added to the soil. Which rank them? How would you rank them?
You can't really compare them. What you can do is make them work together. So if you mix the composting with the biochar, the composting activates the biochar, and then the biochar holds that nutrient from the compost. So it's more efficient if you mix them together.
So in terms of holding down the nutrients, biochar will have an advantage over the
Yes.
or will complement one another.
They complement one another, but if you compare the compost itself and the biochar structure, because as I explained before, it has a lot of has a very porous surface. So the biochar would retain the nutrients, but they work together, if you would imply them. Yes?
So the best thing, I used to actually sell biochar in the States, and the best description I was given is biochar is cheap housing for all your essential microbes. It's like biochar creates these little teeny amazing cheap apartments for everything that is needed for your soil. So if you utilize your biochar with your compost, with your different amendments, it just creates an amazing environment where everything can work synergistically and symbiotically, as well as the biochar will pull out the negatives of the soil, so that way if you have high calciums, if you have herbicides, it does all. So it's kind of it's an amazing supplemental to everything else that you do. Sorry.
Let's see if this comes up. Yes.
Okay, I have a loud enough voice.
Yes.
So do you have a recommended portion per square meter or per hectare of the use of biochar?
Well,
to maximize the potential?
From my studies, because they have many studies that are trying to figure out how much % you should use. However, because the different biochars have different characteristics, you would have to create a table per se for recommended soil types and biochar types to match each other. But I would say in a general sense, like 2.5% by weight. Yeah. But also 1% works. So research needs to be done like in Belize just to determine that specific amount. Yes. Can you use the mic, please?
How easy or how difficult is it to produce the biochar? Like say, on a personal basis, we have a small farm. So is it not economical?
Can Christopher help me with this one?
Biochar is not really hard to make. It can be a little time consuming, but it's really good if you can do your biochar in association with a nearby agro production unit where you have a byproduct, like we use rice hulls, coconut trash, old cacao pods. You can use sawdust, bamboo, something like that. We built one that the slide that was up there that showed the drum. That one there used maybe 15-20 gallons of biochar for firing. And we always, you can see we're cooking on there, we're cooking red mud. The Artocarpus camansi, so we can feed it to pigs. So we take advantage of that energy, because a lot of people make biochar just for the sake of making biochar, which is totally valid and worthwhile. But we spend a lot of energy collecting fuel wood to cook. So it's something about like burning and not harvesting that heat rubs me the wrong way. So what we use it is to cook things. You can heat water with it, you can sterilize stuff. If you hooked it up, you can generate electricity with it in a larger scale than this. You can generate ice with it. There's a lot of things that you can do. This kiln costs us about $150 Belize, and that's purchasing the drum from citrus growers and the whole propane tank we picked up out of the dump. So and a welder put it together for me because I don't have welding skills. And he did a really good job. That's a propane tank that was inverted, so the top is now at the bottom. The ball valve is removed, and then a lid goes on top. You can see there in the top what we're firing is at the very top was mostly cocoon nuts. So we have a lot of that, and that's a really good one because it's got tons and tons and tons of energy in it. If you're using it for cooking, and then it makes very nice biochar. With the exception that you have to mechanically disintegrate it by grinding it.
Thank you.
Chris, how long does it take to make a batch?
It depends. Maybe 2 to 4 hours, depending on your feedstock, and yeah, at the most. And it's sort of with the ball valve at the bottom removed and the guard that you have holes at the bottom of the drum, which you can see in the picture at the bottom. You can look in and see whether or not flame is coming out at the bottom of the retort. If no flame is coming out, it means pyrolysis is done. There's no more stuff to off gas. It's just nothing but mostly pure carbon. Yeah.
Biochar, how long does it be in soil?
Well, according to, well, the Amazon biochar is over 1,000 years of age, so it just stays there. Yes.
It's a very non-lab bioform carbon, meaning that it will stay there virtually forever in terms of human. It's almost pure carbon. They might have a little bit of residues of oils in it.
Yes. Any other question? The difference with the charcoal and the biochar is the surface area of the biochar. Yes.
It's compressed. It's a compression. It's a different makeup. Because charcoal has more ash, and biochar, you go out and have very little ash.
Yeah. The main thing is that the biochar, you do it under very low oxygen levels, and that determines the surface area of the entire physical chemical structure of the biochar. Yes.
So I hear that biochar reduces the need to water because it contains water. What? Can you give me an idea about how much that contains water?
I'm not sure of an exact percentage. Could go on.
1 ton of biochar has a capacity of 30 tons of water in the landscape. So for an empty drought thing to make your particularly for grain cultivation to make your field crops less fragile, biochar can hold 30 times its weight. Yeah, 30 times. 1 ton to 30 tons of water.
Walking on the stage, David.
So they asked me yesterday about why not just burn it in the open. The main thing about the biochar is you can store the carbon. So rather than just leaving the waste material out in the open, which contributes to the carbon starts to go back into the atmosphere, you convert that waste material into a more stable form of carbon. So that's one benefit. The second one is for soil health. It increases the water in the soil, the microbes. And the third one is for waste management. So rather than having the waste in large landfills, you can use all of this waste, recycle it, and have something much more beneficial for agriculture.
He's willing to describe making one.
Okay. So when you put all of these co-benefits, it balances off the cost if it's in an industrial scale.
Do you have a sample of that biochar yet? Do you have a sample of the biochar yet? Do you have a sample of the biochar? Tell us how to make one.
Okay, last year, Mr. Robertson, Beth asked me to do a biochar system to show here. No, it wasn't here, it was Bluffs. Yeah, Bluffs. It was this here, this one. And they're relatively simple to make. In the picture here, it's a butane drum on the inside and a 55-gallon drum on the outside. And as far as the making of it, it's just taking the drums, cutting some holes in them, putting it together, dump the material in, fire it up, and wait. And if any welder sees a picture picture of one, they can make one. So it's not a big deal. And that's how I made I've done three of them now. And I just saw a picture of the first one and just copy it. So it's not a complicated thing. Now, if you want to get into industrial quantities, then that's a whole different story. I've got no experience with that. I've got somebody that wants me to try and design one, but that's another story. So, if there's any questions about the technical aspect of it, I can try and answer.
But the cost of manufacturing.
Okay, the last one I did was for a fellow on the road to Belize, and it cost about $200. And that was, I got lucky with finding a used butane tank and that sort of thing. And I had some materials already at my shop. Now, if I start from scratch and go looking for a tank, that's probably finding one. It costs more in time and transport. The first time I went out to look for one, I found one. So that was good. If somebody comes to me with a tank in hand, I can pick up a drum for $25, $30 in Cayo. I can make one up for $150, $200. Now, how much biochar you get is a simple little thing like this. Depends on how much you need. Any other questions?
What kind of materials do you burn? Can you burn anything?
As far as Mr. Chris, I understood from Mr. Chris, you burn almost anything. Anything that's organic.
Organic, has to be organic. So I cannot burn like plastic bottles.
No.
It has to be organic.
In the studies,
Mind you, plastic is garbage.
the best is
Coconut?
that's abundant here.
Yeah.
And you have to.
But that's the point, though. I just thought of it. Plastic is carbon, basically.
You were away by the way.
Yeah, but off gases, you can't have the glue.
Yes.
My question is, what is your name? Yeah, your glue.
My name is Art Wager. W-A-G-A-R. I got a welding shop in Cayo. 630-3019.
How long does it take to make one?
A couple days. You know, if you really push from morning to night, you'll probably do one in a day. But a couple days.
How do you control the temperature? You said that you need to make sure that it burns at 400 or 500. So how do you know that it's burning at 400?
Good afternoon. It depends, and one of the ways you do that is you control the air take to the outer drum at the bottom. So if you put less air in there, you have less oxygen reaching the inside that has oxygen, which means you get less heat going into the oxygen depleted environment of the retort that's in the center. So you can control that by controlling access to the air coming into the first drum.
Can I add to that? So the biochar is made from these stoves. It's a bit difficult to have one thorough temperature throughout the oven. Therefore, these biochar types would be best for soil amendment. But now if you're talking about reducing pesticide leaching, then you need to have more control of the temperature.
So you have to seal the top.
Yes.
When you start doing a burn.
They have a little lid that you put on and it's tight, and then the bottom is open because you have to have it open. If you don't, you build up a lot of pressure and you could have it'll pop the top off. I had that happen, it kind of just pushed the top up. Didn't do any damage because it didn't create any pressure beyond that, but it didn't, you definitely have to have a place for the pressure that you're building up to escape.
Thank you.